I never thought coming home could feel like stepping into someone else's life. The air in my apartment was the same, faint scent of eucalyptus from the diffuser I loved, but something felt off. I had been gone for months, chasing sunrise light across the Caribbean islands, chasing shadows in New Orleans, chasing stories no one else could see. I had always thought my marriage, our life, was a steady anchor, even while I roamed the world. I unlocked the door, my backpack heavy with camera gear, and noticed the stack of mail on the counter. Bills, catalogs, a postcard from Italy. All normal. Except for the envelope with my name in that familiar, neat handwriting. It was from our joint bank. My fingers trembled as I opened it. The pages spilled out like a confession. Receipts, invoices, and wire transfers. Each one tied to a second apartment halfway across the world, a lavish place in Barcelona. My spouse had been funding another household, another life, for years. And I had been blind. I sank into the couch, clutching the papers, my heart hammering. The world tilted like the ground beneath me had given way. I could almost hear the laughter of my own disbelief echoing off the walls. How could I have missed this? Every vacation, every work trip, every late night, my mind raced through memories, searching for clues I had ignored. The way he had been distant last winter, the mysterious calls he brushed off as work, the way I felt small sometimes, without knowing why. All of it made sense now. I didn't cry immediately. I couldn't. Instead, I felt a hollowing out, like someone had scooped a piece of me and left an empty space behind. Rage simmered, sharp and bitter, but it was tangled with grief. Not just betrayal, I thought. Erasure. He made me feel like I didn't exist. I wandered the apartment like a ghost. Every photograph on the walls, of sunsets, of streets in Havana, markets in Marrakesh, suddenly felt like reminders of a life he hadn't shared with me. I picked up my camera, the one constant in my wandering existence, and aimed it at the receipts. Click, click, click. Evidence becoming art. I could almost imagine the exhibit already. The photographs, the documents, the voice memos I would record of him laughing, oblivious, in places I'd never been. It would be beautiful. It would be devastating. And it would be mine. But right now, in the quiet apartment, I felt like I was drowning. And then I saw the notification on my phone. A text from him. "We need to talk. Please come home." I froze. Every instinct screamed to ignore it, but curiosity and rage coiled in my chest. Did he know I'd found out? Or was this some rehearsed performance, a way to control the narrative one last time? I slid the papers into a folder, took a deep breath, and stared out the window at the city lights twinkling like a promise I didn't believe in anymore. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow I will decide what to do. But tonight, I just let the anger and betrayal wash over me, unfiltered, raw, and relentless. And then I heard it. The faintest creak of the front door. Someone else was home. The next morning, I didn't answer his text. I couldn't. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, the folder of receipts open, sunlight spilling over the evidence like some cruel spotlight. I traced each wire transfer, each payment, each purchase, letting the enormity of it sink in. Barcelona, expensive dinners, a second apartment fully furnished. My spouse had been living a secret life for years, and somehow I had been the one left behind. I felt my fingers curl around my camera. This was the constant in my life, my truth. If he could live two lives, I would make him live one through mine. I decided then, I would turn this betrayal into art. Not just for me, but for everyone who could witness it. I started planning the exhibit immediately. Photos from our travels, juxtaposed with the receipts I'd painstakingly photograph and scan. Voice memos I'd secretly recorded during long phone calls. his laughter, the way he joked about work trips that were never just work. I would lay it all bare and make the audience see what I had seen. I called my best friend Lila, a gallery curator in New Orleans, and explained everything in as much calm as I could muster. I need a pop-up exhibit, something mysterious, something devastating, I said. Lila's voice was sharp on the phone. June, that's intense. Are you sure you want to do this? He's not going to stay quiet. I don't care, I replied. He's already destroyed the story I had of him. Now, I'm telling it. By the end of the week, I was back in New Orleans, sifting through my travel photos on my laptop. The city hummed outside, jazz spilling from Frenchman Street, the smell of beignets in the air. Every image I selected told a story, every angle captured a memory I shared with him, and every one would be twisted into this exhibit of truth. I recruited a few local artists and friends, a sound designer to layer the voice memos into an immersive experience, a typographer to make the receipts readable but haunting. Together, we brainstormed how to arrange the exhibit so it would feel like walking through someone's life, only to have that life unravel before your eyes. I worked late into the night, fueled by coffee and fury. Sometimes I caught myself staring at the folder, imagining him walking through the exhibit, the shock on his face when he realized every lie was on display. A thrill surged through me, and yet, underneath it, I felt a deep ache. This was the man I had loved, the person I had trusted. Betrayal was one thing, but knowing he had hidden entire years from me cut deeper than anything else. I started noticing details I had missed before. The way he texted quickly when I was traveling, the faint smell of a different cologne on his shirts, the extra key he needed for his office. Each small clue became part of the narrative I would build. Every omission, every lie, a brushstroke in the painting of his duplicity. Then came the hardest part, deciding how to get him to the gallery. He would never come willingly. I needed him there when the exhibit opened. I sent him a casual invitation, knowing full well he would be curious. Pop-up event downtown tonight. Thought you might enjoy it. Drinks, art, the usual crowd. And I waited. The hours crawled. I arranged the space, adjusting the lighting, making sure the receipts glowed just enough under the gallery lights. The voice memos were cued, photos printed and framed, capturing moments he would recognize instantly. I felt a pulse of anticipation. This was the moment where my life's work, my pain and my fury would converge. Then I heard the first footsteps outside. The gallery was dim when I arrived, the smell of fresh paint and polished wood mingling with the faint scent of champagne. I could hear muted chatter, glasses clinking, the hum of anticipation. Every piece of my life, exposed and curated, was arranged meticulously. Photos from our travels lined the walls, interspersed with receipts and invoices printed larger than life, almost confrontational. Voice memos played softly through hidden speakers, laughter and casual lies echoing like ghosts. I spotted Lila at the entrance, greeting guests with her usual poise. She leaned in and whispered, "Are you ready for him?" I swallowed hard. As ready as I'll ever be. Then he walked in. My stomach dropped. He looked the same, tall, confident, the easy charm that had once drawn me in, and yet, I could see it in his eyes. A flicker of curiosity, maybe even a hint of fear. He wandered through the gallery, murmuring compliments, but his eyes kept flicking toward the receipts displayed like accusations. I watched him pause at a framed invoice, a luxurious dinner in Barcelona. His jaw tightened. A voice memo played behind him, his own laughter filling the room. He froze, realizing I had preserved the evidence in a way no confrontation or argument could erase. I stepped out of the shadows, my heels clicking on the polished floor. "Enjoying the tour?" I asked casually, like a host welcoming a guest. He turned sharply, and for the first time, I saw him falter. June, I... I held up a hand. Save it. Everything you ever lied about is right here. Every meal, every trip, every wire transfer. I gestured to the exhibit. This is your life now, under the lights, for everyone to see. And you? You can't hide. A crowd had gathered, curious murmurs threading through the room. People leaned closer, reading receipts, listening to memos, piecing together the story. My spouse's confidence wavered under the silent judgment of witnesses who had no context but the truth laid bare. I felt a rush of vindication, sharp and intoxicating. And yet, beneath it, the old ache lingered. This was my revenge, yes, but it also reminded me of the years lost, the trust shattered. He turned to leave, but I called out, "Stay, watch, understand the damage you caused." He hesitated, the room heavy with tension. I could see the realization sinking in. The betrayal was no longer a secret. The world now knew. And so did I. As he walked away, I exhaled, a little of the weight lifting from my shoulders. But I knew this was only the beginning. There were still decisions to make, still steps in this revenge I had only just begun. Outside the gallery, the city lights flickered. I glanced at my phone. Another message from him, shorter this time. "We need to talk." I smiled faintly. Let him come. The real confrontation was only starting. After the opening, the gallery hummed for days with whispers and phone flashes. People posted photos, tagged friends, and the exhibit started a small storm online. I watched the notifications with a strange mix of triumph and nausea, as though each like was both balm and salt in the wound. Lila called me the morning after, voice low and urgent. "June, you went national. Someone picked up your photos and receipts and..." She cut off, like the words were too large for the phone line. "They want to run the story. The paper is asking for comment." My stomach dropped again. I hadn't wanted headlines. I'd wanted a mirror. But once the mirror was polished, the reflection didn't stay private. "I don't want to destroy him," I told Lila, stunned at how calm I sounded. "I want accountability. I want people to know the truth about the life he built behind my back." She was quiet. "People will interpret it however they want. There will be anger. There will be sides." She was right. A day later, the first article hit. A careful piece that mostly reported facts, printed receipts and quotes from neighbors about late-night taxis and unfamiliar luggage. Comments poured in like a tide. Some were sympathetic. Some accused me of staging a publicity stunt. Some celebrated his exposure and called for consequences. The public tribunal had begun. Then came the message I hadn't predicted. An email from his sister, Mara. "We need to talk," it read. "He's not who you think. There are reasons." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Reasons. I'd seen the receipts, traced the transfers, listened to the laughs on the memos. Reasons felt like excuses wrapped in someone else's grief. Mara came over that evening with soup and a softness I hadn't expected. "Junie," she said, using the nickname I rarely let anyone use now. "I'm sorry." Her eyes were red-rimmed. "I didn't know either. He did this slowly. He told me he was saving, for what he called a dream. He said it was for us." Her voice cracked. "I thought it was for family. I didn't know about another household." Sympathy hovered in her tone, but it was edged with pain. She wanted connection, not to erase the crime. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because he's broken," she said simply. "And I don't know what to do. You made it public. But I think..." She swallowed. "I think you should hear more. There are things he's done that are complicated." I felt my defenses tighten. Complicated was a folder I had closed, but something in her face tugged at the part of me that still remembered family dinners and small kindnesses. For a fleeting moment, I considered listening. That night, as rain smudged the city lights, I opened my laptop and reviewed the receipts again. I mapped dates to trips, mapped trips to voice memos. I annotated everything, like building a dossier for an investigation. The exhibit had been catharsis. The dossier felt like armor. Then Lila called with another problem. The investor funder, a man named Cass, wanted to meet me. He'd been at the gallery opening, polite, phlegmatic, one of those men who wore affluence like a second skin. He claimed he'd sponsored a cultural exchange in Barcelona and was upset to find his name associated with a personal scandal. "Do you want to meet him?" Lila asked. I did. I didn't. But I knew one rule. Truth is a many-headed thing. If I wanted to reclaim the narrative, I needed to understand how every head fed into the story. The meeting was at a midtown restaurant that smelled faintly of garlic and business cards. Cass arrived with the smooth gait of entitlement. He apologized, all polished regret, and then began to ask questions about provenance and permissions, about whether any of the images were staged, about whether the voice memos had been edited. His tone implied I had manufactured the betrayal for drama. Every question was a nudge toward discrediting me. I answered with measured facts, handing him scans, timestamps, bank confirmations. He sipped his wine and watched me like a man putting together a puzzle he hoped was false. When I left, I felt both exhausted and strangely clarified. The exhibit had exposed him? Yes, but it had opened avenues for him to fight back. He could rally the sympathetic, hire counsel, muddy the waters. Back at my apartment, I realized my next moves needed to be surgical. Public spectacle had served me. It forced him into the light. But now legal and social countermeasures were a real threat. I needed allies beyond friends and artists. I needed documentation, testimony, legal counsel. I slept poorly, dreams stitched with receipts and flashes of Barcelona. When I woke, I received a message from an unknown number. "Meet me. There are things you should know." A friend. A friend? Or a trap? I thought of Mara's trembling eyes, of Cass's polite skepticism, of the investor's quiet fury. The world had become layered with motives and manipulations. I sat on the edge of my bed, camera at my feet, folder of receipts open on the table. The revenge had splashed into the public, and the ripples were widening faster than I could steer. Then I heard a soft knock at my door. Not the deliberate knock of someone announcing themselves, but 3 soft taps, almost hesitant. I walked to the door, heart thudding. I opened it a crack. A woman stood there, rain on her coat, eyes solemn and tired. She held a small envelope with my name written in a hand I did not recognize. "Juniper Hayes?" she asked. "Yes." She held the envelope out. "I was asked to deliver this. No one else will know." Her voice was steady. "It's from someone who wants to help." I took the envelope, fingers shaking. Inside was a single Polaroid and a scrap of paper with an address. The Polaroid showed a balcony I recognized, Barcelona sunlight, a potted plant, the same railing in one of the receipts. But there, in the corner, partially cropped, was a woman I'd never seen. She looked small and worn, but there was a ring on her finger. My throat closed. The scrap of paper had a time, tonight at 10, and an address 2 neighborhoods over. I looked up at the woman on my threshold. "Why me?" I whispered. She didn't answer. She only said, "Because he needs to see what you have already shown the world, and because she deserves to be seen." The rain picked up, hard and insistent, as though the city itself were holding its breath. I stared at the Polaroid and the scrap of paper on my kitchen table, heart hammering. Barcelona sunlight, a railing, a woman I didn't know, and a time, 10 o'clock tonight. My first instinct was caution. My second was curiosity. And the third? The undeniable pull of justice, of discovery. I packed lightly, my camera, the folder of receipts, a small notebook, and a pen. The city outside buzzed with life, streetcars rattling, distant jazz, the aroma of evening beignets floating through the air. I left my apartment like someone stepping into a mission I hadn't fully scripted. The address led me through narrow streets and alleys, streets I'd walked 1,000 times but never really noticed. 10 o'clock came, and I paused before a modest apartment door. Rain had soaked the streets, reflecting city lights like fractured glass. The door opened before I could knock. The woman from the Polaroid was there. She was older than I expected, tired in a way that spoke of long struggle, but her eyes held a quiet strength. "Juniper Hayes," she said, voice soft. "Thank you for coming." "Who are you?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "I'm Elise," she said. "She's my sister." She gestured toward the Polaroid. "She didn't know about you, and she doesn't even know about the other life he's built. But she deserves to know. And you deserve to see her." The folder of receipts felt suddenly heavier in my bag. I wanted to show her everything, every transaction, every proof of betrayal. But I didn't. Not yet. I needed to understand who she was, what she had lived through, and what her story meant in the larger tapestry of his duplicity. We talked quietly for hours. She told me about the letters he'd sent her, not always signed, sometimes intercepted, sometimes vague promises. The tone of someone caught between love and deception, between hope and disillusion. I listened, absorbing every detail. It was a complicated betrayal, more tangled than I had imagined. And yet, the anger that had driven me through the exhibit, through the public exposure, was still there. It simmered beneath every word, beneath every detail. I realized then that revenge was no longer a singular act. It was a process, unfolding in layers, peeling back the stories of the people he had used to protect himself. As the night deepened, Elise handed me a small notebook, worn and frayed at the edges. "Everything she knew, she wrote here," she said. "I thought you should have it." I flipped through it, heart pounding, recognizing names, dates, places. Another part of the story I hadn't known, another thread of deceit. And yet, it also gave me clarity. This wasn't just about humiliation or public exposure. It was about uncovering the full truth, holding the pieces together, and reclaiming the narrative for myself. When I left, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. I looked back at the apartment, at Elise, at the city streets glowing faintly in the wet night. I felt a mix of dread and purpose. There were still more layers. There were still more people whose lives intersected with his duplicity. And I was going to uncover them all. The next evening, I stood outside the address from the Polaroid, rain still slicking the streets. My hands gripped the folder of receipts like armor, my camera slung over my shoulder. Inside, Elise waited, calm but watchful. "This way," she said, leading me into a dimly lit apartment. It smelled faintly of coffee and lavender. The woman in the Polaroid stepped forward, her face tense. She introduced herself as Mariana, quiet, wary, but strong. "You've seen enough to know the betrayal," she said, voice low. "But there's more. He built layers, hidden accounts, other transactions. If you want justice, you need the full picture." I nodded, swallowing the ache in my chest. I'd thought the exhibit exposed him completely, but here it was. Another life, another layer of deceit. Every heartbeat reminded me of my own lost time, my own trust shattered. We worked late into the night. Mariana shared documents I hadn't seen, images, emails, small slips of paper with cryptic notes. I scanned everything, adding it to my growing dossier. It was becoming less about revenge as spectacle and more about reclaiming truth. I realized justice wasn't only in public humiliation, it was in having the facts aligned, undeniable, untouchable. By the end of the night, we had a plan. We would coordinate with legal counsel to ensure the exposure was backed by proof, so any attempt to gaslight or sue me would fail. We would document every layer, every witness, every discrepancy. Mariana would testify to what she'd discovered independently, and the exhibit? It would become a controlled, immersive narrative, truth as evidence, art as accountability. The next morning, the reality of what we were about to do hit me like a tidal wave. This wasn't a stunt anymore. We were stepping into the legal, emotional, and public battlefield, and there was no going back. I felt the familiar anger rise, but underneath, there was also resolve. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, I felt the power shift. I wasn't just reacting, I was orchestrating, and every move had purpose, precision, and impact. Then a new message arrived on my phone, short, deliberate, from an unknown number. "He knows you've met her. Be careful." My pulse quickened. He was aware, maybe even dangerous, and yet, the fire that had been lit in me only burned hotter. I packed the dossier, camera, and laptop. Today, the battle would escalate. The next encounter would be decisive, and I would face him, fully armed with truth, strategy, and the unwavering knowledge that betrayal had sparked a transformation I could never unlearn. The rain had stopped. The city gleamed under streetlights, and I walked toward the storm that was waiting for me, not with fear, but with purpose. The city seemed to hold its breath as I arrived at the cafe where he had agreed to meet, a neutral territory, carefully chosen. My camera was hidden in my bag, my folder of receipts zipped shut. The dossier was complete, cross-checked, and meticulously annotated. He was already there, seated by the window, eyes scanning every entrant. When he saw me, his expression faltered, just a fraction. The confident mask he wore in public cracked ever so slightly. "Juniper," he said, voice low but controlled. "I didn't expect you." "Neither did I replied, keeping my tone even. "But here we are, and I think it's time we talked about the truth." He gestured vaguely toward the empty chair across from him. I sat, placing my bag on the floor. My heart beat fast, but my mind was razor sharp. "I've seen the exhibit," he said cautiously, "and I know you've collected everything." "What do you want, June?" I leaned forward. "I want accountability. I want the truth recognized. Not just by me, but by everyone who has a stake in the lives you've affected." He sighed, leaning back. "You make it sound simple." "Life isn't simple, June." I cut him off, steady and calm. "Life isn't simple. Betrayal isn't simple. But facts are facts. Receipts, transfers, voice memos. They don't lie. You can spin your story, try to justify it, but it's all here." I tapped the side of my bag. He looked away, jaw tight. Silence stretched, punctuated only by the low hum of the cafe. I could see him calculating, weighing what he could say, what he could manipulate. But the weight of public exposure, the scrutiny he had thought he could avoid, pressed on him like gravity. "You think this is all over?" he asked finally, voice low. "You think a gallery and a few photos that will erase the nuances, the context?" I shook my head. "It doesn't erase context. It amplifies truth. It makes invisible actions visible. That's all I'm doing. Showing the world the reality you tried to hide." A server walked by, carrying a tray of cappuccinos. I didn't flinch. The dossier lay quiet in my bag, waiting. Every document, every receipt, a reminder of the layers he had built to protect his lies. He took a deep breath, and for the first time, I saw vulnerability. Not charm, not confidence, but fear. Fear that he could no longer control the narrative. Fear that the person he had underestimated, me, now held the map of his world. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, voice cracking slightly. "I thought I could manage both lives." "Manage?" I asked, incredulous. You call destroying trust and building a secret household managing? You erased me. You erased years. And now you're surprised there are consequences? He looked down, unable to meet my eyes. And I realized then, the first confrontation wasn't about winning or losing. It was about recognition, about forcing him to see the magnitude of what he had done. We sat in silence for a long moment, the cafe noises fading around us. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of this private reckoning. And I understood that this was only the beginning. The legal, public, and emotional battles were still ahead. But I had taken the first decisive step. I left the cafe with a calm I hadn't felt in months. My hands were steady, my mind clear. The confrontation was done, but the war, the full orchestration of justice, had only just begun. The morning after the cafe meeting, I sat at my apartment with the dossier spread before me like a battlefield map. Each document, receipt, and photograph represented leverage, evidence, and proof. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was methodical. Every step had to be precise. I called Lila first. We need a legal consultation, full disclosure, full documentation, no gaps. She agreed immediately, her voice a mix of urgency and admiration. I'll set it up. You're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers, June. By afternoon, I met with a seasoned attorney who specialized in marital and financial law. I explained the full scope: hidden accounts, overseas transfers, voice memos, receipts, even witness statements from Mariana and Elise. The lawyer's eyes widened. "You've built a meticulous case," he said. "If you play this right, you won't just protect yourself. You can make a permanent mark on the record." I felt a thrill that had nothing to do with revenge, but everything to do with control. For the first time, betrayal wasn't just a wound. It was a tool. Next, I turned to social strategy. The exhibit had gone viral, but I needed to control the narrative before misinterpretation or backlash diluted its impact. I drafted a public statement, measured, factual, unflinching. The goal wasn't to humiliate more than necessary. It was to document, to create a trail that could not be erased. Meanwhile, messages arrived from friends and followers, many expressing shock, sympathy, and support. Some offered information, small details about suspicious trips, unexplained absences, and financial anomalies. Each piece added depth to the mosaic of truth I was building. By evening, I reviewed everything again, connecting dots, aligning dates, and annotating evidence. I realized revenge wasn't a single explosive moment. It was a campaign, careful, deliberate, and multifaceted. Then, as I prepared to call it a night, another message came. A photo of a plane ticket from him to Barcelona, dated 2 weeks ago, with no accompanying explanation. My stomach tightened. He was moving, potentially covering his tracks, or maybe digging deeper. Either way, the next moves had to be immediate and strategic. I packed the dossier and camera. Tomorrow, I would meet Mariana and Elise again, cross-reference every lead, and finalize the approach. The game had shifted from reactive to offensive, and somewhere, I knew he was already feeling the pressure. The war was no longer just personal. It was structural, legal, and unrelenting. I leaned back in my chair, hands clasped around a warm mug of coffee, and thought, betrayal had sparked this transformation, and I wouldn't stop until every layer was exposed, every truth documented, and justice, in whatever form it needed to take, was undeniable. The night was quiet, but I could feel the storm building, and I was ready. By morning, the city buzzed with news of the exhibit. Screens across social media flashed with headlines: "Hidden Lives Exposed, Juniper Hayes' Revolutionary Exhibit." I watched from my apartment, a strange mix of satisfaction and tension twisting in my stomach. The first wave of comments hit fast, some supportive, some defensive, some incredulous. He had underestimated the reach, the precision, and the resonance of truth when it was laid bare. I called Mariana and Elise immediately. "We need to meet," I said. "Today, before anyone tries to spin it." At the apartment, we spread out documents, photographs, and timelines. Each piece corroborated another. There was no wiggle room, no ambiguity. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. I felt the shift. The power was moving into our hands. Then, my phone buzzed. It was him. "We need to talk, please." I stared at the message, the air thick with tension. But I didn't reply. Not yet. He had reached out, but that was his vulnerability. I had the leverage now, and every move needed to reinforce that. By afternoon, journalists had started calling. Friends and acquaintances shared their stories. Every layer of deception he had tried to hide was surfacing in fragments, then converging into a full picture. I realized revenge wasn't just about confrontation. It was about timing, control, and narrative. The exhibit was no longer just art. It was evidence, truth, and a framework for accountability. That evening, I walked past the gallery, light spilling onto the wet streets. Inside, the installation pulsed with stories, faces, and receipts. I could feel him there, somewhere, aware that the world was now watching. And I understood. The public reckoning wasn't cruel. It was fair. I met Mariana and Elise outside, nodding at each other. The next phase would be strategic exposure, selective, controlled, unrelenting, and we were ready. Then a message appeared on my phone from an unknown number. "He knows you're escalating. Expect resistance." I smiled. A cold, determined smile. Resistance had always been part of the plan, and I was prepared. The city glittered under streetlights, but for me, the night was alive with possibility, strategy, and the knowledge that the next move would be decisive. The morning air was crisp when I arrived at the courthouse. The folder of evidence sat beside me like a silent ally. Every receipt, every photo, every voice memo was meticulously organized. No chance for loopholes, no room for manipulation. My lawyer, Lila, gave me a reassuring nod. "This is it, June. The first formal step." I breathed deeply. Months of anger, betrayal, planning, and careful strategy all funneled into this moment. Today wasn't just a meeting. It was a public, legal declaration that his duplicity could no longer hide. Inside the courtroom, he looked different. The confidence I had confronted at the cafe had faded. He glanced at the folders on my lawyer's table, then at me. His jaw tightened. "Juniper," he said, voice low. "You don't have to do this in public." I looked directly at him. "I don't do this for spectacle. I do this for truth, for accountability, and for every piece of my life you tried to erase." The lawyer began presenting evidence: bank statements, overseas transactions, photos, and timelines. Mariana and Elise provided testimony confirming aspects of the hidden life. Every layer built a comprehensive, undeniable picture. He tried to argue, deflect, rationalize, but the precision of the evidence combined with the public nature of the filing left him with no ground to maneuver. Each document I had painstakingly gathered became a brick in the foundation of truth. I watched him falter, and inside, a strange calm settled over me. This wasn't cruelty. This wasn't vengeance for its own sake. This was reclamation. Reclaiming the narrative, reclaiming my years, reclaiming the truth. After hours of testimony, filing, and cross-examination, the judge acknowledged the thoroughness of the evidence. My lawyer outlined next steps for protective measures, public acknowledgement, and formal consequences. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. I gave a statement. Factual, clear, composed. I didn't smear. I didn't yell. I didn't dramatize. I simply stated the truth and the steps being taken. Cameras clicked. Microphones captured every word, and for the first time, my voice carried weight beyond the personal sphere. Walking away, I felt lighter, stronger. The confrontation had been executed, the first wave of accountability underway, and the world, my world, was beginning to shift. But as my phone buzzed with a new message, a chill ran down my spine. He's not finished. Neither are you. I smiled, a mixture of anticipation and resolve. The game was far from over. But I had taken the first decisive strike, and the tide was beginning to turn in my favor. The next morning, my phone buzzed constantly. News outlets were now reporting on his side. Carefully worded statements, half-truths, attempts to cast doubt. He wasn't passive. He was countering. And the stakes had just doubled. I took a deep breath, scanning every article, every social media post. He was trying to manipulate perception, but I had built a fortress of evidence too strong to crumble. Still, I knew I had to act fast. I called Mariana and Elise. We need a coordinated public response. Evidence, timelines, testimonials, everything. Nothing unverified, nothing emotional, just facts. We spent hours drafting statements, cross-referencing documents, and preparing for potential attacks on credibility. Every detail mattered: dates, transactions, locations, messages. Every tiny inconsistency in his narrative became a weapon. By afternoon, I had scheduled a live interview with a respected news outlet. I would present the facts directly, clearly, and without embellishment. No sensationalism, just the meticulous, undeniable truth. In the hours before the broadcast, I felt the tension tighten in my chest. I knew he would watch, wait for a misstep, and try to spin it again. But I was ready. Every receipt, every photograph, every voice memo had been rehearsed in my mind. I would not falter. The camera rolled. I spoke calmly, confidently, detailing the hidden accounts, overseas transfers, and the corroborating testimonies of Mariana and Elise. I made sure to emphasize that this was about accountability, not spectacle. Every fact hit like a calculated strike, leaving no room for doubt. Later that evening, his public facade started cracking. Statements became defensive, interviews awkward. The world began to see the full picture: the hidden layers, the deception, the betrayal. And I felt the power shift more firmly into my hands. As I closed my laptop, a new message arrived. "You think it's over? Watch closely." I smiled. Resistance had always been part of the plan. But now, I was ready for the next wave. And this time, it wouldn't just be about exposure. It would be about finality. The kind of closure that can only come when every truth is undeniable. The following week felt like a storm. Every phone notification, every email ping, carried tension. He had hired new lawyers, ones with reputations for aggressive tactics. I could feel the walls closing in, but I refused to retreat. At a pre-trial meeting, his team tried a new tactic: discrediting the witnesses. "How can we be sure these statements are unbiased?" one lawyer asked. "They were close to Ms. Hayes. Personal motivations could influence memory." I watched him sit there, attempting a smirk that faltered under the weight of truth. I leaned forward. "You're right. There are emotions involved. But facts don't lie. Dates, transactions, receipts, recordings, all verifiable, all objective." The judge nodded, scribbling notes. The pushback was expected. I had prepared for it, rehearsed counterpoints for every objection, and collected extra corroboration in case it was challenged. After hours of back and forth, a minor surprise hit. One of his overseas contacts had accidentally left a digital trail: emails confirming transactions, schedules, and even a voice note acknowledging my existence. My lawyer passed me the files. I felt a rush of vindication. This wasn't luck. It was the consequence of meticulous planning. Later that evening, I met Mariana and Elise. "We're not done yet," I said. But this is the moment where the game changes. We strategized for the public phase, anticipating his every possible move, rehearsing responses, preparing evidence to counter misinformation. The gallery, the media, the legal filings, all were part of a synchronized plan to leave him no room to maneuver. And yet, beneath the strategy, the adrenaline was personal. Every betrayal, every lie, every erased memory fueled the drive. I wasn't just pursuing justice, I was reclaiming myself. Then a message came from him. "Stop this now, Juniper, or you'll regret it." I read it, and a calm resolve settled over me. Fear had no place in this campaign. Every word he sent was a confirmation. He understood the storm he had unleashed, and it was headed straight toward him. I closed my laptop, taking a deep breath. The final moves were coming. The confrontation, the exposure, the culmination of months of strategy. And this time, nothing could derail the plan I had so carefully orchestrated. The night of the gallery event, I arrived early, heart steady, mind clear. The installation glowed under soft lights, each photograph, receipt, and voice memo strategically placed to tell a story no one could ignore. I watched as guests arrived, art critics, journalists, friends, strangers, all drawn by curiosity and word of mouth. And somewhere in the crowd, he walked in, confident as always, unaware of the full extent of what awaited him. I felt a chill as our eyes met. There was recognition, fear, and disbelief all at once. He thought he understood the narrative. He didn't. Not yet. The first whispers began as people interacted with the exhibits. Screens displayed his transactions, maps traced his overseas activity, and voice memos played faintly, capturing moments he had tried to erase. Guests murmured, shifting uncomfortably. The weight of exposure settled over him like a physical presence. I stayed calm, walking among the crowd, observing reactions. Each glance, each gasp confirmed the strategy. Reveal the truth. Don't embellish. Let the evidence speak. Then he approached me. "Juniper," he said, voice tight. This isn't necessary." I smiled, cold and controlled. "It was necessary the moment you tried to erase me." He tried to argue, to charm, to explain, but the evidence was relentless. The documents, the timelines, the corroborations. Everything pointed to one truth. He could no longer hide, manipulate, or deny. A crowd gathered as some recognized him, whispers growing into murmurs of shock. The gallery became more than an art space. It was a courtroom of perception, and the judge was the audience itself. For the first time, I felt the full measure of empowerment. This wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was justice, truth, and reclamation, all woven together. As the night progressed, he retreated, defeated not by confrontation, but by transparency, precision, and the inexorable force of evidence. I realized something profound. Truth, when presented without fear or exaggeration, has a power that no charm, no manipulation, no deceit can withstand. And in that glow of the gallery lights, surrounded by truth, validation, and my own reclaimed story, I felt free. The storm had passed, but the lesson lingered. Every betrayal carries the seed of its own exposure, and every hidden life eventually finds the light. The morning after the gallery event, the city felt different. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered. Social media, news outlets, friends, strangers. Everyone was talking about the exhibit, the evidence, and the man who could no longer hide. I sat in my apartment, a cup of tea warming my hands, reflecting on the months that had brought me here. Betrayal had cut deep, leaving scars I thought would never fade. But through strategy, patience, and unwavering attention to truth, I had reclaimed my story. Messages came from people I didn't know, thanking me for sharing my experience, for showing courage, for proving that truth and accountability could triumph over deceit. A few whispers of apology from mutual acquaintances floated through. Small, quiet reminders that actions have consequences. I picked up my camera, staring at the lens. I realized that the same tool that once captured moments of beauty, travel, and freedom had now become a means of justice and expression. Photography, like life, could both preserve and reveal. That evening, I met Mariana and Elise one last time for a celebratory dinner. We laughed, we toasted, we shared memories and victories. The tension that had held us together through months of planning slowly melted. For the first time, it wasn't just about revenge or strategy. It was about reclaiming life itself. A final message arrived on my phone. I opened it, expecting threats or bitterness. Instead, it was blank. Nothing. Silence. The kind that signifies closure, the end of a chapter, the space to breathe again. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the city lights. The world hadn't changed, but I had. Betrayal had been transformed into power, truth into liberation. And as I exhaled, I felt a profound sense of peace. The story was mine again, wholly, unapologetically. I smiled quietly, knowing that no lie, no hidden life, and no act of deceit could ever erase the person I had become. The past was honored, the truth revealed, and my future, bright, unbound, and fully reclaimed, awaited. Months had passed since the gallery. The world continued moving, indifferent and unrelenting, but I had found my own rhythm again. I traveled lightly, carrying my camera and a notebook, seeking moments of beauty, stories of resilience, and quiet corners of the world that reminded me life could be both fragile and extraordinary. I received messages from followers, friends, even strangers, telling me how my story inspired them to speak up, to reclaim their voices, to confront betrayal with clarity and courage. Each note reminded me that my experience wasn't isolated. It rippled outward, touching others in ways I had never anticipated. One morning, I stood on the edge of a cliff overlooking the ocean, wind whipping my hair, sun warming my back. The camera hung loosely around my neck, but this time, I wasn't capturing someone else's story. I was savoring my own. Free. Whole. I thought about the past, the months of plotting, confronting and reclaiming what had been stolen. I didn't feel bitterness anymore, only clarity, empowerment, and gratitude. Betrayal had tried to define me, but I had rewritten the narrative, not for revenge alone, but for myself. I sent a brief text to Mariana and Elise. "Thank you for standing by me. Now, we live." They replied with laughter, emojis, and promises of future adventures. I smiled. Life had returned, full of possibility, and the lessons of truth, accountability, and resilience would guide me forever. As the waves crashed below, I realized that the storm had done its work, not just revealing the truth, but shaping me into someone unshakable. The world could still be unpredictable, cruel, or deceptive. But I had learned that power wasn't in vengeance. Power was in reclaiming your story, in living authentically, and in finding joy after darkness. I exhaled, eyes closing briefly, feeling the vast horizon stretch ahead. The past was honored, the present was mine, and the future, bright, boundless, and fully reclaimed, awaited. It had been nearly a year since the gallery, and the echoes of that chapter still lingered, but softer now, like a tide pulling back, leaving clarity in its wake. I had traveled more, explored corners of the world I had only dreamed of, and met people who reminded me that connection and trust were worth cultivating. Occasionally, I glanced at the news or social media and saw his name fading, his influence diminishing. The man who once seemed untouchable was now just a memory, a lesson, and a cautionary tale for others. And for me, he was gone. I was present. I started a new project, a series of photo essays about resilience. Not just mine, but stories of people who had survived betrayal, loss, or hardship. Every frame, every caption was infused with honesty, courage, and the quiet power of truth. One evening, I walked along a quiet beach, camera slung over my shoulder. I smiled at the waves, at the horizon, at the unknown. Life was unpredictable, yes, sometimes unfair. But now I understood that storms pass, that truth endures, and that reclaiming yourself is the ultimate victory. As I raised my camera and captured the light fading over the ocean, I realized something profound. The story wasn't just mine anymore. It was universal, about betrayal, courage, and the reclaiming of life. And sharing it meant that no one truly suffers alone. I exhaled deeply, letting the salt air fill my lungs. The past had shaped me, the truth had freed me, and the future, bright, unbound, and full of possibility, stretched endlessly ahead. Weeks after the final epilogue, I decided to reflect publicly. I posted a short video on my travel photography channel, sharing not the betrayals themselves, but what I learned from them. Life, I said into the camera, will test you. People will deceive. But how you respond defines your story. I chose patience, strategy, and truth. Not anger, not recklessness. That's what reclaimed my life. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in. People thanking me for showing courage, for modeling accountability, for turning personal pain into collective insight. Some shared their own stories of betrayal, mistakes, and recovery. It was clear that honesty resonates, and vulnerability can empower. I realized the greatest revenge isn't humiliation or retaliation. It's reclaiming yourself, rebuilding your life, and using your experience to help others. By turning pain into wisdom, I transformed what once threatened to destroy me into a force for clarity, inspiration, and change. Closing my laptop that night, I understood something vital. Storms end, secrets are revealed, and those who dare to face the truth come out stronger, freer, and more alive than ever. The world remains unpredictable, yes, but truth, patience, and courage, those are constants, and I intend to live by them every single day. Months after sharing my story publicly, I received messages from followers asking how I kept my strength, how I rebuilt trust, and what I would do differently. I decided to answer them directly. A casual, candid Q&A for anyone who wanted insight into surviving betrayal. People often ask, I said into the camera, how I turned devastation into empowerment. The truth is, it wasn't immediate. It was deliberate. Patience, careful planning, and a focus on truth. Revenge alone isn't enough. Reclaiming yourself is the goal. I shared small anecdotes, how I documented everything meticulously, leaned on supportive friends, and never let anger cloud my judgment. I emphasized that accountability matters, not spectacle. Exposing deceit is not about shaming others, but asserting your own narrative. By the end of the session, I noticed a pattern. Viewers were inspired, reflecting on their own lives, their own hidden betrayals, and the ways they could reclaim control. I realized this story had grown beyond me. It had become a lesson, a source of empowerment, a reminder that no one has to suffer alone. As the camera turned off, I felt a quiet satisfaction. The storm of my past was fully behind me, yet it had shaped me, honed me, and prepared me for the unknown. And as I looked forward, I knew that life would still test me. But this time, I would meet it with courage, clarity, and unwavering truth. The horizon was endless, full of possibilities, not just for me, but for anyone brave enough to face their own storms.